In the serene yet shadowed town of Willow Creek, cradled by ancient oaks that whispered secrets in the wind, lived a breathtaking young woman named Laura. Her blonde hair flowed like liquid sunlight, her emerald eyes sparkled with life, and her laughter was a melody that warmed the coldest hearts. Married to Daniel, a kind-hearted carpenter whose rough hands crafted beauty from wood, Laura's existence was a tapestry of love woven into their modest third-floor apartment. The weathered brick building overlooked the gentle Willow Creek, a place that had once been their haven. But destiny, with its merciless grip, unraveled their joy on a fateful evening. It was September 10th, 2025, a day marked for their third anniversary celebration. It began on a day that promised joy. At 3:45 p.m., Laura set out for the local market, a light step in her stride. She was planning a special dinner for her husband Daniel to celebrate their 5th anniversary. The air in Willow Creek was heavy and unnaturally still, a suffocating calm that precedes not just a storm, but a tragedy. The first sign of the impending doom wasn't a rumble of thunder, but a profound, eerie silence that fell over the town, hushing the birds and stilling the leaves on the trees. With her basket swinging, Laura hummed a soft tune, her mind on the evening ahead. But as she walked, a persistent chill traced its way down her spine, a feeling of being watched by unseen eyes. The sky didn't just darken, it curdled. The clouds descended with a malevolent purpose, a swirling mass of black and deep purple. Then the wind began, not a natural gale, but a low, mournful howl that seemed to carry whispers of forgotten sorrows through the narrow streets. She reached the frail wooden bridge spanning Willow Creek just as the first drops of rain began to fall, each one as cold as a shard of ice. In an instant, the gentle creek transformed. A flash flood, yes, but this was something more monstrous. A churning, muddy beast roared up the creek bed, carrying with it the scent of deep earth and ancient decay. The wooden structure didn't just groan under the strain. It let out a high, splintering shriek, as if an immense, unseen weight was pressing down upon it. For one terrifying heartbeat, as Laura gripped the railing, she thought she saw a pale, distorted face surface in the torrent, its mouth agape in a silent scream. Then the planks beneath her feet shattered, and she was gone. Daniel waited, the ingredients for their anniversary dinner sitting untouched on the kitchen counter. When the storm reached its unholy crescendo and Laura still hadn't returned, a cold, sharp dread pierced his heart. He raced into the deluge, his calls of her name swallowed by the roaring wind and rain. He soon joined the desperate townsfolk, a small army of hope against the raging night. Their flashlight beams cut feeble paths through the darkness, revealing a creek that had become a ravenous monster. As they combed the sodden banks, some of the searchers flinched, swearing they heard a woman's laughter on the wind. A cruel, high-pitched sound that mocked their frantic efforts and chilled them to the bone. The search continued through the night, a grim vigil of dwindling hope. Dawn finally broke on September 11th, 2025, its light revealing the devastation. At 8:17 a.m., her body was found, tangled in the reeds downstream. Her beauty was stilled, frozen into a mask of chilling, hollow surprise. Her eyes were wide open, staring at the weeping sky as if she'd seen an impossible truth in her final moments. And clutched in her right hand, a detail that would haunt the town for years, was a single perfect water lily, caked in mud, a flower that did not and had never grown anywhere in Willow Creek. The coroner's report was stark and official: death by drowning. It noted there was no time to cry out, no chance to bid a final farewell to Daniel. But in the margins of the official file, the old coroner had scribbled his own unnerving observations. The water found in her lungs was brackish, with a salinity inconsistent with the freshwater creek. And on her ankles, faint, bruise-like marks that resembled the delicate imprint of fingers. These details were omitted from the public record, dismissed as anomalies of the turbulent water, but they planted a seed of doubt, a whisper that Laura's death was not a simple accident. Her funeral was held that very afternoon, at 3:45 p.m., precisely 24 hours after she had left for the market. Under a weeping gray sky, Daniel stood as a widower before the freshly turned earth, a hollowed-out shell of the man he was. He let a single white rose fall into the grave, his silent tears mingling with the persistent drizzle. He murmured promises to the silence, promises of unending love, of finding her again, of never letting her be forgotten. But the silence that answered was not empty. As the first shovelful of dirt struck the coffin with a hollow thud, a sudden frigid wind swept through the mourners, carrying with it what sounded like a watery spectral whisper. It was a single chilling word, a name that was not Laura's, a dark omen of the true horror that had just begun to awaken in Willow Creek. Weeks bled into months, and the apartment became a mausoleum of memories. Daniel preserved Laura's essence, her favorite scarf draped over the armchair, her scent lingering in the air, her laughter haunting his dreams. He threw himself into his craft, carving intricate wooden figures to stave off the gnawing void. But the loneliness was a relentless companion. The townsfolk watched his decline with pity, urging him to seek solace in the local grief support group. But Daniel preferred the solitude of his pain, the creak of his workbench, his only solace. Then, on a moonless night, October 15th, 2025, at 11:47 p.m., an unnatural chill swept through Willow Creek. The wind howled like a banshee, rattling windows and stirring the leaves into a frenzied waltz. At the cemetery's edge, where Laura's grave lay beneath a gnarled willow tree, the earth quivered. A sickly green glow pulsed from the soil, and with a sound like an anguished sigh escaping the depths, the ground cracked open. Laura emerged, her once radiant beauty twisted by death. Her blonde hair hung in sodden, matted strands. Her emerald eyes now glowed with a hollow, eerie light, and her tattered dress clung to her spectral form like a shroud. She was no longer the living Laura, but a restless spirit, bound by an unfulfilled vow to say goodbye to Daniel. Her journey commenced under the shroud of darkness, a ghostly figure gliding through the fog-choked streets. The 10-mile trek from the cemetery to the apartment building was an odyssey through a nightmare landscape. She passed the derelict mill, its rusted blades groaning in the wind, and the abandoned schoolhouse where shadows writhed in the shattered panes. Townsfolk later recounted fleeting glimpses of a wraith in white, but dismissed it as a phantom of their imagination. Laura's ethereal presence left no footprints, yet the air grew frigid and oppressive wherever she tread, as if the night itself recoiled from her passage. The clock on the mantelpiece chimed its 12 solemn notes, marking the arrival of October 16th, 2025. 1 year to the second since Laura was taken from him. Outside, the old Willow Creek apartment building stood like a tombstone against the starless, ink-black sky. On the third floor, a single window glowed with a soft, unwavering light. It was the lamp Daniel lit for her every night, a desperate, foolish beacon he hoped might guide her home. He had promised he would always leave a light on, a promise made in laughter during a silly argument, now transformed into a sacred, heartbreaking ritual. The silence of the city was absolute, a held breath waiting for something to break. And in that silence, she came. Laura's spectral form drifted up the worn central staircase, not climbing but flowing like smoke. She was a memory given shape, drawn back to the one place in the universe that still felt like hers. With every floor she passed, the building itself seemed to recoil. The cheap fluorescent lights in the hallway didn't just flicker, they buzzed and spat arcs of angry electricity before dying one by one, plunging the ascent into a deeper gloom. The air grew heavy, condensing into a visible, icy mist that smelled of damp earth and winter roses, her favorite. A profound cold seeped through the walls, a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn night, but everything to do with the grave. She passed through the solid oak of apartment 3B, a threshold she had crossed 1,000 times in life, now an insignificant barrier. Inside, the apartment was a shrine. Her books remained on the shelves. A half-finished cup of tea sat on her nightstand, and the air was thick with the scent of wood shavings and stale grief. Daniel sat at his workbench, oblivious. His world had shrunk to the small block of pine in his hands. He was carving a swan, its neck gracefully arched, its wings half-formed. It was the last thing he'd promised to make her. The rhythmic scrape of his knife was the only sound, a meditation against the screaming emptiness in his heart. A single tear fell from his cheek, landing silently on the polished wood, a small dark stain on an unfinished dream. Then, he felt it. Not a draft, but a sudden invasive plunge in temperature that settled deep in his bones. He paused, knife held aloft. A shiver, violent and uncontrollable, convulsed through him. He dismissed it. Grief did strange things to a man, but then came the scent. Faint at first, a phantom memory of Jasmine, her perfume. He squeezed his eyes shut, his heart aching with the trick his mind was playing. But the scent grew stronger, cutting through the smell of pine and dust, as real and present as if she'd just walked into the room. The candle he'd lit for her sputtered, its flame dancing wildly as if caught in a gale, though the air was perfectly still. A floorboard creaked behind him. His breath hitched. Every nerve screamed at him not to look, to stay hunched over his work and pretend it was nothing. But a desperate, impossible hope warred with his terror. Slowly, agonizingly, he turned in his chair. And there she was. Not a memory, not a dream. She stood by the bookshelf, bathed in a cold, ethereal moonlight that seemed to emanate from her very being. Her form shimmered, the edges indistinct and bleeding into the shadows of the room. She wore the dress she'd been buried in, but it flowed around her like water. Her face was pale, perfect, and so terribly sad. And her eyes glowed with a soft internal fire. And they were locked on his, filled with a year's worth of unspoken love and sorrow.
Her voice was not a sound that traveled through the air, but a whisper that bloomed directly in his mind, achingly familiar yet layered with a chilling echo. Daniel. The name was a caress and a wound. They told me I had to cross over, that my time was done, but I couldn't leave, not without saying goodbye, not when I can still feel you here, keeping a light on for me.
Tears streamed down Daniel's face. A mix of unbelievable joy and absolute terror. He rose from his chair, stumbling forward. "Laura!" he choked out. He had to touch her, to prove she was real. He reached out a trembling hand, aiming for her shoulder. But his fingers met no resistance. They passed directly through her, and a cold so profound, so utterly devoid of life, shot up his arm and seized his heart. It was the cold of the void, the absolute zero of non-existence. He snatched his hand back with a gasp, the impossible reality crashing down on him. She was here, but she was gone. Her expression hardened, the soft sorrow replaced by a chilling urgency. She began to speak, her mental voice a torrent of memory and pain. She spoke of their first meeting under the willow tree by the creek, of the future they had mapped out in that very room, of the children they would never have. But then her tone shifted. It was no longer just a lament. "It wasn't an accident, Daniel," her voice echoed, laced with a spectral fury. "I was pulled from my body. Something is wrong here, in this town. There is a darkness in Willow Creek that holds onto things that should be let go. It doesn't want me to leave. It doesn't want anyone to leave." Her words were a chilling prophecy, each syllable dripping not just with the weight of the grave, but with a terrifying imminent warning. But as she lingered, a horrifying transformation began. Her face, once a vision of beauty, contorted into a death-ridden visage. Her skin sagged and grayed, her eyes sank into dark hollows, and her lips curled back to reveal jagged, decayed teeth. The sight was a grotesque mockery of the Laura he knew, a chilling reminder of the grave's claim. Daniel recoiled, a scream caught in his throat, as Laura's spirit seemed to falter. With a final, shuddering breath, she turned, her deathly form gliding back toward the door. She walked out, her footsteps silent yet heavy with an otherworldly dread, leaving the apartment in a swirl of icy mist. The lights stabilized, but the air remained thick with her departure. Outside, the wind howled louder, as if mourning her retreat. When dawn broke on October 16th, 2025, it wasn't with a gentle warmth, but with a pale, anemic light that seemed afraid to touch the town of Willow Creek. At precisely 6:32 a.m., Martha, the baker's wife, making her early morning delivery, noticed Daniel's workshop door was ajar. Peeking inside, a scream caught in her throat. Daniel was found slumped by his workbench, not sleeping, but frozen in a state of waking catatonia. He was clutching the now-finished wooden swan. Its polished surface was marred by something impossible. Two faint, perfectly formed tracks, as if the wooden creature itself had wept real tears that had then dried, staining the grain. His own eyes were vacant yet eerily alive, fixed on a point in the room only he could see. He didn't blink. He didn't seem to breathe. He was simply there, a vessel hollowed out by a night of impossible sorrow and wonder. Dr. Albright was summoned, a man of science, but he could offer no explanation. Daniel's heart beat steadily. His body was unharmed, yet he was utterly unresponsive. It's as if his soul has stepped out for a moment and forgotten the way back in. Albright confessed later at the tavern. It was this medical mystery that allowed the seeds of superstition to take root in the town's fear. The tale spread, mutating with every telling. In the pews of the old church, some hailed it as a spectral miracle, a testament to a love so profound it could command a spirit back from the ether. But in the shadowed corners of the pub, others spoke of a terrifying haunting. They argued that no loving spirit would leave a man so broken that Daniel had made a pact, or that Laura's soul was now trapped. An oppressive, unnatural chill settled over Willow Creek, a cold that had nothing to do with the autumn air, causing inexplicable frost to bloom on window panes in the middle of the day. An investigation confirmed Laura's grave remained undisturbed, the earth above her coffin firm and untouched. This fact only deepened the mystery. Yet the haunting persisted. On moonless nights, when the wind howled through the cemetery's willows, locals reported hearing a mournful whisper carried on the air. It wasn't just a sound, it was a word, a single deathly farewell echoing through the trees. Goodbye. A chilling final end to a conversation no one else had heard. Daniel never remarried. He eventually returned to himself, though the light in his eyes was forever dimmed. He dedicated the rest of his long life to a single obsessive task, carving swans. His workshop became a silent, dusty sanctuary filled with hundreds of them, lining every shelf. Each one was a perfect replica of the first, a tribute to the wife who rose from the grave, bid a chilling goodbye, and walked back into the shadows. And chillingly, each one bore the same faint, tear-like stains beneath its eye. He became a local legend, the swan carver of Willow Creek. The swans became objects of folklore. Some believed they were blessed, others that they were cursed conduits for Laura's restless spirit. The story of a love transcending death became the town's most famous ghost story, forever etched in the eerie, watchful silence of Willow Creek, a permanent reminder that in this place, the veil between worlds is terrifyingly, irrevocably thin.